Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to talk about the church, kind of why we started it, and then the direction we're going in the future. This is our 1-year anniversary, so we've actually been running since 17th of June of last year. So it's really interesting, I think, for us to hit this milestone and reflect a little bit upon where we've been and what we've accomplished, and then where we should go in the future. So that's the goal for today's discussion, and for those of you who can't be here at home, please feel free to chime in on Facebook so that we can have a robust conversation about where we should be going, what we want the church to be in the future. So I'm going to talk a little bit about where we started in terms of our ideas, because I think it's important. We've had a lot of new people join, and to give a clear understanding of where we are, because I think that's the great starting point for a discussion to move forward. So one of the questions I like to ask people when they come to us for the first time is, why are you here? So everyone has different reasons, and that's okay, because we're all going to have unique motivators in our lives. So the reason that I'm here, the reason the Humanist Church is important to me, is because of my kids, my children. And we were talking about this at our game night last night a little bit. There's a lot of confusion, I think, in the world, and a lot of energy directed in ways that I think are counterproductive for the continuing survival of humanity. And so to me, the reason I'm here, the reason I'm engaged in a conversation with fellow humanists, is to make the world a better place, specifically for my kids. From my perspective, the rest of my lifetime will probably be fine. I have made it to a point in my life, in Western society, in all of the times in the world, where I can live a fairly comfortable life. But I don't know that that's going to be true for my children. And I think that's a question that's been raised for the first time, probably in a generation or two, that things might actually be getting worse. So I know for me, that's my unique motivator on why I'm here. And I think it's important for us to all reflect on why it is that we're here. What is it we want to accomplish? And then bring that into our conversation of what the church should look like and how we should move it forward. So there are three major, what we would call features or benefits of a humanist church. And we'll talk a little bit about why we chose the word church as well. But the three features that we talk about that we have are purpose, community, and consistency. So purpose is that we have this unifying goal to help humanity survive and thrive. And when we talk about humanity's survival, we're not just talking about that there are humans alive, but that we continue to create and advance meaning, the human narrative, right? We make it more and more complex, that we add value to the whole of human existence. And as we talked about last week, in terms of a human superorganism. So all of humanity as one thing, getting more and more complex to make us better able to survive and thrive in the future. And then community is how we do that, right? So the way that we add meaning is by engaging in community. Because if we think that we can do this alone, that we can just work off on our own to the side, I think that's a little bit misguided. Because we're social creatures. We're designed to be communal creatures. And so it's important for us to engage deliberately in community. And so we start by being here today, right? So we start by coming to service, spending time with each other when it takes energy and it takes getting away from watching shows or Netflix. It takes prioritizing this over something else. And that's why I think it's important that we call it a service, because it's a service that we all come together in the same room to be with each other, right? To understand each other. And then the third thing, which I think is really important, is consistency. Other religions offer community and purpose. And then some other religions maybe are a little bit lighter on the purpose, but have a little bit more consistency, or at least are accepting of many different frameworks. But to me, the three of these things together with consistency gives you something a little bit more. And one of the things that I think humanism, the way we look at it, gives people is a framework through which to process their life, process their experiences, make consistent decisions. And I know for me personally, in coming up with the services that the topics we're going to talk about has caused me to reflect on those topics. And then when I see that I'm living inconsistently, it's easier for me to correct those things because I'm holding those topics in front of me to say, I'm not really living consistently with what I hold to be valuable, and reflecting on it and then coming to talk about it helps me to do that. Consistency, at least in my life, has made everything a lot easier. I find that I'm less frustrated by things. I'm more patient with my family. I'm more patient with other people because I know that it's consistent with my values to do that. And because I take the time to reflect on it, at least on a weekly basis, it just makes it makes it easier. So it's like playing life on easy mode to an extent. So I think if we value those three things, purpose, community, and consistency, that the church can be a force for good in our lives. This church in particular. So with that, I want to talk a little bit more about what things that we think this church offers over some other ones. So for purpose. So religious churches, traditional churches do offer purpose, but their purpose tends to be grounded in after this life. Right? As we talked about a couple of weeks ago, we don't know after this life exists. So some people argue, well, Pascal's wager says that it makes the most sense for an individual to bet on an afterlife because it's a finite loss for an infinite gain, potentially infinite gain. But that's only as an individual. But we operate as a collective, right? As a human superorganism. Therefore, what do we lose collectively if that's the wager we take? So the wager we say, in terms of the humanity's wager, is that even if there is an interventionist God who is going to provide for us, or if there's an interventionist God who is not going to provide for us, it makes the most sense to operate as if there's not an interventionist God, because if we don't, then we are nearly guaranteed, with the exception of something that we can't prove because it's outside of our existence, we are guaranteed to lose in the long run because we're not taking care of ourselves. So there are too many options that don't continue humanity's survival. Therefore, it makes the most sense to take our lives into our own hands. And in fact, there are passages in the Bible where it says basically, God will help those who help themselves and those who help others. So I think there's some good indication that we should be headed down that path, whether you're religious or not. But I also think purpose helps to put everything into perspective. Like I said, if we can focus on what it is I'm trying to achieve with my life, it helps us to focus our activities and cut off some of the things that maybe cause us extra anxiety and distress. They cause us to focus on the things that are actually important in life, such as family and investing in our family, investing in our community. Clearly, adhering to a purpose advances humanity, right? So we're engaging with each other to build that meaning and build it through community. And then I also think it bridges cultural and political divides. Because if you talk to someone who might believe something wildly different than you, most of them, the vast majority, are going to agree that they want their children's lives to be better than theirs. And I think that's something that unifies us, right? I think that's something that's in the core of what it means to be human, is to provide for our offspring. So that's purpose. So community, one, is good for us, right? Science tells us that people who have community, people that come together on a regular basis, are more healthy. The more connections, the more healthy connections we have in our lives, the healthier we are both physically and mentally. So that's just an easy one. It also builds resilience. There are studies that have shown that people who have connectivity and have resources are going to be more resilient to stresses in their lives. And since we're all going to encounter stresses in our lives, it makes sense to invest in the community and the resources that are going to help protect us as we go forward. And there's something that's interesting. So there's a quote, James Lane Allen: "Adversity does not build character, it reveals it." What that means to me is that when you're in a crisis is not the time to be reaching out for other people's help. You need to have built that structure beforehand so that when you're in adversity, you can rely on those other people. Right? That's when people's character is going to be demonstrated. And it's not you in the crisis. It's really hard for you to demonstrate your character because many of us are flailing around wondering what are we going to do. But it's those other people that we give that opportunity to reveal their character, but it requires us to build those connections beforehand. And then the last one, like I said, is consistency. Now, the way that we're consistent is not to build a perfect structure, right? A perfect belief system that's always right. I don't even know if such a thing is possible. But we build consistency by not believing or not having blind faith in certain dogmatic principles. We build consistency by basing everything that we do on doubt. That we question things, that we're skeptical, and that we're constantly looking for better ways to do things. Now, eventually we have to make decisions, so we have to make choices, and those choices are based on assumptions or beliefs, if you want to call it that, but they're not beliefs that can never be shaken. Right? These are beliefs that are what I would call operational beliefs. All right? I believe as if gravity is always going to work. Now, every once in a while, if we're talking about space travel, we might question exactly how gravity works. That's a good thing. But for general daily operation, I'm going to believe as if gravity works. I'm going to believe as if it is better not to lie and murder people to get what I want because, as a society, I think that will create more stability and therefore is more beneficial to me, right? So we have to make operational assumptions. But we don't base things in mysticism. We don't base things on, well, somebody said, right? Unless that somebody has some background that we think is relevant to whatever it is we're talking about. So that's actually how we build a consistent framework, is to start from this idea of, I think, therefore I am. I don't know that other things exist, but I'm going to assume they exist. But I also know that I'm making an assumption. And then from there, we build our picture of the world around us. We triangulate that with the people who are around us, and that we agree that the table is here and we're in this room together and it's good to engage as a community. We triangulate those assumptions to then build a good enough picture to make decisions from. And then every once in a while we question that, say, is that still really the best thing to do? We have a conversation, then we agree it either is or isn't, and then we move forward in a new direction. And in this way, I think it's easier to understand our place in the world as individuals. If you start from yourself as your center of existence, right, or your center of certainty, and then things farther away from you get less certain, right? But the more people we have around us that we're connected with, we can then better triangulate certainty of what we should be doing and how we should be going forward. But that way, instead of basing it in something completely outside of ourselves that we can never prove, we internalize it and say, it is good for me to engage in community, to build humanity's meaning. And then if everyone's doing that, we build little pockets of strength. And then when we link them together, we build this human superorganism, this structure where we're all connected. And I think it makes sense in today's world that we all realize we're all connected. But I think it's important for us to realize that there's power in those connections. And if we engage in them deliberately, we reinforce that power. That connection is the meaning that we're building. So what is it that we do? What are some of the things that we would say are tenets, right? How will we describe ourselves and what we do? So skeptical, scientific, we improve upon ourselves, our communities, and then the whole of humanity, right? So again, it starts with us. Even in little ways, right? Being a little bit more fit, being a little bit more kind, being a little bit more understanding, right? Getting off our butts to go engage in activities that maybe aren't the thing that we would prefer to do most, but we know it's going to help us build connection. So we engage in this service, right? In the construct of the humanist church with purpose, but without mysticism. Right? We volunteer because we know it's good for the community, not because it's good for our soul. Though there is evidence that it's good for you in terms of how you feel about yourself, in giving to others. And that we make the world more plentiful through invention and stewardship. And this is the idea of post-scarcity, right? There are plenty of resources in the world if we knew how to marshal them appropriately. And so if we focus on that, it helps us from being afraid that I'm not going to have enough, being afraid that I'm not going to be able to provide for my family. Because if we engage with each other and build those connections and come up with an agreement basically that says, I'm going to take care of you because I know you would take care of me. And in building that trust, we actually make it real, right? So last night we had people over for game night, and somebody had too much to drink, and then somebody else volunteered to take them home. It's that simple, right? We provided for one person, and that might have been the thing that kept them from dying yesterday. Maybe not. But it's those little things and providing for each other, sharing our resources that make the world better and ensure that our human relatives, right, continue to exist. And it's not simply to build a comfortable place for today. And that's one of the critiques I'd have of some of the other churches that I've seen or been a part of is a lot of it is trying to relieve what they would consider the suffering of today. And instead of just being okay with today, being okay with the struggles you're going through, being okay with whatever, it's about advancing from that position. It's about making the world better. It's about not just helping people through the hard times that they have, but then saying, all right, how do we get past this? What's next? One of the things that I also think is important about our church is that we welcome anyone who wants to help humanity advance. So while this is a humanist church, it's not exclusive of people of other religions. Because most of us in this room started in a religious church when we were young. So we all have developed past that point where we found that framework wasn't useful to us. And we've had other people who are still theists or even still religious from some other church, but they don't feel that they fit into those organizations anymore because they feel that they've closed off certain doors or they're not accepting of certain people. And so they're looking for a new place to be. And so I want to make that clear that we accept everyone who wants to advance humanity. And in doing that, as we go forward in the future, we're going to build that community to be bigger and stronger. Because diversity of thought is the thing that's going to help us reinforce and strengthen our ideas, figure out better ways to do things. If we all believe the same thing, then we're just as likely to run off a cliff as a group as we are to survive as a human group, right? So it's good to have people who are on the fringes who think something different that might detect a different threat to humanity than we might. So we build inclusive communities. And what that means is we do things like go out to communities who are denigrated by the majority, right? Who are put off to the side, who are seen as lesser. So an example of that is, so next weekend we're going to Queerport, which is a arts expo, is what I'm getting at. Basically, it's an arts showcase for the LGBT community. And we're not going there to do anything really other than be present, to show them that they are part of humanity and they're part of what we see as the future of humanity. And that's what we mean by being inclusive. And we're going to have conversations with people who disagree with us. And one of the things I think is important is a lot of people who make their way out of religion, and I know I was like this, especially when I was younger, we believe that we're right, that we found the right answer, that our way is correct. And if anyone doesn't agree with us, then they're wrong. Because it's innate in humans that we want to win. We want to win arguments, we want to win wars, we want to win competitions. But I think as humanists, we have to let go of this desire to be right. Now, in the grand scheme of things, we need to be right as humanity because the alternative is we all die. But in terms of the individual, being right all the time isn't particularly useful as a concept, because that means we're not stretching our minds. It means we're resting in comfort, right? If everyone tells us we're right all the time, then we're not being challenged, we're not learning. So we're all about learning and progress while letting go of being right. One of the things we talked about last night was that an educated person knows many things, but a wise person knows nothing. And I think that's an important saying to keep in your head, because that goes back to the idea of uncertainty, right? You know that you exist, but you don't know that anything else exists. Now, you don't go around doubting the table and the walls, right? But you have to have that little voice in your head that doubts, and especially that doubts if you are right. Is there a better way to do this? Am I a good person? Am I doing the things that I think are consistent with my beliefs? And to really ask those questions and reflect clearly on what it is that you're doing. That's hard. It's a very hard thing to doubt yourself. Now, people have doubt about a lot of things, their looks and things that society pressures them on, but to doubt if you're right is much harder. And then finally, we focus on the infinite game over the finite one. And that goes a little bit back to winning, right? It's not about the next election cycle. It's not about convincing someone in a Facebook argument. It's about the ongoing survival of humanity. So sometimes we're going to have conversations that people are going to think they won out of, right? That they scored the points. But if we introduced enough doubt in them that they go on to reflect for a couple more years and end up coming around to our way of thinking because they found it to be more beneficial, then that's how we win. Because the thing with an infinite game is you got to keep the game going. Finite games are about winning. You close down the games, we're done, right? Zero sum. But the infinite game is that there's enough for everybody. And the goal is to get more people playing and to keep the game going as long as you can. Now, so in terms of the church, this is not the end, right? We've been up for a year, we're good, all right, we're done. We figured out how to make a church, we win. This is an iterative process. The idea is that people in other places start something like this. Not this exactly. I don't care if the name is the same, the tenets are the same, but that generally they're forming organizations that are looking out for humanity. Because the question is, who's looking out for humanity? Which organization in the world? I don't know. Is it our government? No, they're looking out for our country, right? That's what they're designed to do. That's their structure. Is it the UN? Maybe, but I don't know if in the current construct that's particularly useful, right? They're looking out more for the current power structure in the world. Are they really looking out for humanity? So who is it? You know, traditional churches look out for people's souls, but again, the soul is only important in the afterlife, not in this one. So really, what this humanist church is doing is being an organization that puts humanity first. That at the end of the day, we make individual decisions that contribute to ongoing human existence. So that's what we're about. And I would love to see other organizations pop up and that they're different from us, that they think they have a better way to do it. This is really an alpha test, not even a beta test. We stood up a humanist church in Shreveport, Louisiana, in the middle of the Bible Belt, because we wanted to try. And I think considering we've been fairly successful. We've been running services that people show up to for a year. We've had volunteer events, we've had community events. We've had social events that a lot of people go to, right? And we've built a community of people that I think now feel that they have someone to go to that understand the world like they understand the world, or at least close enough. I think that's a very powerful thing. And to me, in retrospect, it didn't really take that much, right? We've mostly been using public spaces to gather. Took a little bit of Facebook coordination. I have to come up with topics every week, but I've not found it to be particularly challenging. There's plenty to talk about. Right? We have great conversations. That's it. All people have to do is decide that we're going to come together, we're going to form a community, we're going to contribute service by gathering together, and we're going to take little actions that help to better ourselves, better our community, so that we can go on to better all of humanity. So to me, it's both very simple but very powerful. And if everyone were doing this in traditional religion, in the humanist church, in our communities, I think we'd start to realize that we could break down the divides between people because we're aligned on so much, and the things that divide us are so few that we could make the world a better place. So with that, thank you for the first year. Thank you for coming today. After we turn off the video, we're going to talk a little bit about where we think we can go in the future and what we here want this church to be. And for those of you who are at home or who see this later, please contribute, because that's what we need to know. We need to know, what does the community want? This isn't my church, this is our church. It's the same thing I tell my kids at home. It's not your toy. These are our things that we share. So with that, thank you again. Have a fantastic week. As always, reflect on what you're grateful for from the week previous and what you're looking forward to in the week to come. And since it's our annual anniversary, think about the last year. What things are you grateful for in the last year, and what are you looking forward to in the year to come? And even if you've had hardship in your life, there are things to be grateful for. Sometimes it takes looking past the things that were hard to see them.